many years after the 1945, somebody contacted me and asked me, weren't you at the Elbe River and met the Russians? I said yes. They said, well, we celebrate the meeting of Soviet and U.S. forces at Torgau on the 25th of April every year. I said, well, I wasn't at Torgau, I was in Magdeburg. He said, that's fine, that's good enough for government work, but you were at the Elbe, so why don't you come and help celebrate with us? So I came, and there was this marker in Arlington Cemetery, and the Russian ambassador had a ceremony laid on where all the former republics of the Soviet regime, which are now separate nations, each one of those would bring a wreath to lay at that marker. And there were, probably almost a dozen wreaths there. And here we were, a handful of American veterans from World War II. And there were some Russian schoolgirls who were in Washington. And they gave us a little rose, and we would put the rose on the marker, which seems pretty austere when you have all these other wreaths and there wasn't any American wreath. I contacted Senator Warner. Now, that's not the present one. That's the old Senator Warner at the time, and he agreed with me that we really should have a better presence. So the next year, there was somebody from the State Department, and there was a lieutenant colonel in uniform, but neither one brought a wreath. And the following year was going to be the 60th anniversary, and I was told there'll be a big deal. And the big deal, of course, was that I was invited along with Igor Belosevich, who actually was at Torgau. The two of us were invited to come to Moscow and celebrate the meeting of Soviet and U.S. forces at the Elbe, and that's where we would treat it just royally, as I indicated before. But when I came back, nothing had changed. It was still the same. I think it was now a colonel that came instead of a lieutenant colonel, but still no wreath. So the following year, I said, to heck with it, and I bought a wreath. And when I brought the wreath, when they saw the wreath, they immediately placed my wreath as the first one to be placed on the marker. So you could see that they really appreciated when we came with a wreath, and the wreath said, U.S. military veterans, and on behalf of all the veterans, I laid the wreath. And I felt better about that. And from then on, I brought a wreath every year. Now, when the 70th anniversary came, and I was invited to Russia, but at that time I was invited for Victory Day, and not for the meeting of the Elbe. So I was able to go to Arlington Cemetery for the Elbe meeting, and wouldn't you know it, there came a high-ranking State Department representative with a wreath. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff came with a wreath, and the Russians had his counterpart. He came with a wreath. Well, of course, my little wreath now still was number 3. They had put the State Department first, the military one second, and number 3 was my little wreath. And then came all the wreaths of the former Soviet Union. Anyway, I felt real good about it because I could see that there was some evidence of us taking a part